This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
Welcome back to the X-Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell, coming to you from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free, 1-800-610-7035. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, on MSN Messenger, X-Zone Radio TV at Hotmail, and our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. And, of course, the X-Zone is heard right around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network, X-Zone Broadcast Network, UK High Definition Radio, Euro High Definition Radio, Star Cable, and our broadcast affiliates right across Canada, the United States, the Caribbean, Central America, South America, the Pacific Rim, Asia, India, Africa, and Europe. My guest this hour is Dr. Cyril Wecht. He's a nationally acclaimed forensic expert. And being an expert in forensic medicine, the doctor has frequently appeared on several nationally syndicated programs discussing various forensic scientific issues, including medical malpractice, drug abuse, the assassinations of both President John F. Kennedy and Senator Robert F. Kennedy, the death of Elvis, the O.J. Simpson case, and the JonBenet Ramsey case. His expertise has also been utilized in high-profile cases including Mary Jo Kopechne, Sonny Von Bulow, Gene Harris, Dr. Jeffrey MacDonald, and the Waco Branch Davidian Fire, and Vincent Foster. A comprehensive study of these cases are discussed from the perspective of Dr. Wecht's own professional involvement in his book, Cause and Death, Grave Secrets, and Who Killed JonBenet Ramsey. Joining me now is Dr. Cyril Wecht. And Dr. Wecht, welcome to the X-Zone.
Hi. A pleasure to be with you. Thank you for inviting me.
Tell me, Doctor, when we talk about forensics, or when most people hear forensic experts, they think of CSI on television. And how different is the work of a forensic expert compared to the people that we see on TV?
Well, the differences probably lie mostly in the difference between fiction with its exaggeration, embellishment, and dramatic presentation, as opposed to the sometimes dullness and drudgeries and hard work of real life. So, to a great extent, CSI-type programs set forth in a broad fashion what is involved in the field of forensic scientific investigation, death investigation in criminal matters, and so on. However, it must be pointed out and should be kept in mind by people who do these programs that they're a long way from reality in terms of many things. Number one, the amount of time, effort, energy, and number of people who are involved in a particular case. Number two, the rapidity with which things are accomplished, testing, analysis in minutes, days, and so on. Number three, some technological tools that really don't exist. I get a chuckle out of this when I'm with my colleagues. We kid about this. Everything seems to be done in the dark with a blue light. Most of the time we function in the light, and we don't have the special magical blue lights that enable us to find things that cannot be visualized otherwise. And another very, very big difference, the one that does bother me, the others I kind of chuckle at, But the one that bothers me is that they depict the forensic pathologist and other forensic scientists as part of the prosecutorial team, as part of the homicide detective group, and so on. We are not, I repeat for emphasis, forensic scientists are not homicide detectives. Nothing wrong with being a homicide detective, and if that's what you want to be, fine. And I'm stating this mostly for the younger folks listening so that they don't get the wrong idea about what they want to pursue when they go into college and so on. If you're thinking of being a homicide detective and finding out who committed a crime, then you're thinking about being a detective. If you're talking about learning what happened and dealing with it in an objective, detached, unbiased fashion in scientific modalities and so on, then you're talking about forensic science.
All right, Doctor, we've got to take a 2-minute commercial break. We'll be right back. Exonation Dr. Cyril Wecht is my special guest, and we'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away.
This is Johanna Carroll, host of Dialogue with Divinity on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. While walking along Kaanapali Beach in Maui this past year, I kept discovering all these shells and coral in the shape of hearts. My dialogue with Divinity was very simple. Do you want me to do a retreat to heal people's hearts in Maui next year? And of course, the answer was yes. As a master spiritual teacher, I am offering you a neat retreat called Rise, May 8th through the 12th, 2017, and the chance of a lifetime to rest at a 5-star resort for 5 days and experience a spiritual renewal of your heart and soul. Kaanapali is one of the top 5 beaches in the world. This stunning resort has undergone a $40 million renovation. I walked the entire property, checked out the room choices on your behalf, and I must say it is stunning. Our conference room faces the ocean with sliding glass doors. Maui is known as Mother Maui because it is a soft, gentle, healing energy. In the embrace of Mother Maui, you will feel yourself rising from the limitations of an ordinary life to an extraordinary journey of peace, bliss, and harmony. A greater sense of clarity. Our Rise retreat ignites renewal in the sacred elements of air, water, earth, fire, and wind. There's plenty of free time to enjoy all that Maui has to offer. A small deposit is required now to reserve your space, as this retreat, it will sell out. For more details, please go to johannacarroll.com and register today. Aloha, and I'll see you in mystical Maui.
Exonation, Dr. Cyril Wecht is our special guest. He's a nationally acclaimed forensic expert. His website is www.cyrilwecht.com, and that's CYRILWECHT.com. Doctor, what is the difference between a forensic expert and a coroner?
Well, it may be one and the same. For example, I just recently was a keynote speaker at a fundraiser for a colleague of mine who is a forensic pathologist functioning as an elected coroner in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, and he is a coroner. And I had been coroner for 20 years, 2 separate 10-year terms in Allegheny County, and I am a board-certified forensic pathologist. Most coroners, however, are not forensic pathologists, and the great majority are not physicians. The difference, I think, that you're probably zeroing in on is between the medical examiner and coroner. A medical examiner, by definition, as applied in this context, is a person who has trained and been educated and formally certified in the field of forensic pathology. That means med school, 5-6 years after med school, a national examination, and now you're a forensic pathologist. A coroner, in all jurisdictions except a couple, I think Ohio, Louisiana, and here and there, they don't have to have any particular credentials. Those 2 states require the coroner to be an MD. Other places, it could be anybody over the age of 18 or 21. However, that doesn't mean that the coroner system is necessarily bad, weak, or deficient, and that all medical examiner systems are automatically going to be great and wonderful because they're headed up by forensic pathologists. It comes down to a matter of administration and recognition of your responsibilities, your role in the community. A lay coroner who understands what he or she is supposed to do and who calls upon and utilizes forensic pathologists to do the autopsies, forensic toxicologists to do the analyses of body fluids and tissues, and then call upon other experts if needed, anthropology, entomology, odontology, engineering, criminalistics, and so on. The job can be done quite well also. But that's the difference. The coroner system goes back to 12th century England, adopted then in the colonies along with the other so-called row offices that still exist around the country. And medical examiner system came to America in 1877 in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. At the present time, it's roughly half and half around the country. Most large metropolitan communities will have a medical examiner system. There are some exceptions. And most rural areas will have a coroner's system. But as I say, there are kind of hybrids and variations on that basic theme.
I would imagine, sir, that over the last 15, 20 years, there have certainly been major advances in science and medicine that have been a great asset to you as a forensic expert.
Well, that's quite true. And interestingly, on a quite fortuitous basis, many of these have occurred having nothing to do with criminal justice and forensic scientific investigation in mind. Mm-hmm. For example, they started with DNA back in the early 60s. Nobody was thinking about criminal justice. It took almost 2.5 decades before Sir Alex Jeffreys first applied it in England in a murder case in 1983 following the death of a little girl and the testing of all the male villagers, and then picked up 3-4 years later in this country by the FBI. That's been the biggest. A lot of changes that have occurred in the field of radiology, chemistry, toxicological testing, some things in pathology by way of new staining techniques, etc. These have developed for other reasons, but in any event, we have adopted these as medical examiners, coroners, forensic pathologists, and utilize them to our great advantage in trying to determine how a person died, when, where, why, and coming up with other bits of information that can help the homicide detectives zero in on finding out who committed the murder, or in some instances, and I think of even greater importance, showing maybe that a murder was not committed or that the death occurred in some way that does not fix blame on someone who would have otherwise been arrested and even convicted.
If the present day investigative techniques that are used by yourself and other members of your most important forensic field, do you think that the Kennedy assassination of President John F. Kennedy would have been different with a different outcome?
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, I just participated in a discussion, which I've done before, with my very dear friend and esteemed colleague, the internationally renowned criminalist Dr. Henry Lee.
Yes.
And we were talking about this. And DNA, you see, would have been important. Go back to the most critical piece of evidence, namely Commission Exhibit 399, the what I've dubbed the magic bullet, the hero of the single bullet theory, which is the essence, the sine qua non of the Warren Commission report, that bullet produced 7 wounds in 2 men, the President and Governor John Connally, and did all that damage except for the head wounds on Kennedy. Now, the single bullet theory has the bullet exiting from Kennedy and going into Connally. If the DNA analysis had been done, and I'm not criticizing them because it was not around in 1963, but that DNA analysis would have shown whether that bullet did indeed penetrate both men. And that would have been the end of it, because if it was shown to have done so, then all of the criticism that I and other Warren Commission critic researchers have been leveling for the past 43 years would probably not have taken place. And if it was not shown to be the case, then there's no way that the Warren Commission report would have withstood scrutiny for one single day. So you're quite right. And then there are other things too, X-rays, studies, and other modalities pertaining to the head wounds, etc. There's a lot of things. But I want to say this about JFK. Despite the fact that there are certain techniques, particularly DNA, that were not available at that time, that was not the major fault. From a medical forensic scientific standpoint, the major fault was that the autopsy was done by two hospital pathologists at Bethesda Naval Hospital who had never done a single gunshot wound autopsy in their entire careers. I repeat that for emphasis. Our president, I don't care, you're Democrat, you're a Republican, you're liberal, conservative.
You're still
the
president
of the United States that has been assassinated. You've got a very difficult case for the most experienced, competent forensic pathologist. How many wounds, the sequence, the angle, the trajectory, the correlation between Kennedy's and Connolly's wounds, and to do that very, very complex autopsy, they called in Humes and Boswell, who were career naval pathologists and who had never done a single gunshot wound autopsy in their entire professional careers. Is that pretty disgusting? And if there's anybody out there that believes and accepts the Warren Commission report and asks themselves, gee, how could it be that things are so bad, and Wecht and all these other people that continue to criticize the Warren Commission report, on what basis? Know from the beginning that what you are accepting are the findings of two inexperienced, incompetent forensic pathologists. Well, they weren't forensic pathologists. They're incompetent because they were never trained to be forensic pathologists, and who were career military officers working in the presence of four-star admirals and generals who were dictating to them what they could do and what they should not do.
Is it possible, sir, to reopen the case using today's forensic procedures to further investigate the assassination of President Kennedy?
Oh, yes. If you mean, is it possible, would it be feasible to do so from a forensic scientific standpoint? Absolutely. However, if you're asking me, is it possible in the sense, is it likely to occur? No. As painful as it is for me to make that admission, I got to be honest and realistic with myself and with everybody else. It's not going to happen. The government has been sitting on this for 43 years, and it's highly, highly unlikely. I don't see anything happening. Certainly not in my lifetime. From their standpoint, it's a keg of dynamite. They covered up, and it was an obscene demonstration of governmental authority. It was a coup d'etat. It was the overthrow of the government through the assassination of our leader, and they are not going to revisit that. It's too hot a potato.
Is it as hot as the potato of the assassination of Senator Robert Kennedy?
Yes, it is, albeit the senator, as widely respected and loved by so many people, and to a great extent, sometimes even more so than his brother, but still the senator is not a president. From a forensic scientific standpoint, the evidence is even clearer in the RFK case. One of the things I love to do when I'm talking about my cases before an audience is I ask them, how far was Sirhan with his gun when he shot at Robert Kennedy in the Ambassador Hotel that fateful night back in June of 1968, when Robert Kennedy was being escorted through the back way of the kitchen in order to get out of there with his clothes on from his wonderful admirers and devotees and so on. So Sirhan was there and he shot. And people then give me their answers now collectively over the years, I'm sure, to the tens of thousands of people, audiences all over. One says 8 feet, 3 feet, 5 feet, 2 feet, 10 feet, 12 feet, or so on. And when I tell them that the pathology experts, including an esteemed colleague, Dr. Tom Noguchi, who was the chief medical examiner of Los Angeles that did the autopsy, 5-6 board-certified forensic pathologists on his staff, 3 board-certified military forensic pathologists called in by Tom to be there invited as his guest, so that the government wouldn't try to finesse things as they did with JFK and spirit the body away. And then 2 civilian forensic pathologists, I and Dr. William Eckert, now deceased, called in as consultants by Noguchi, that all 12 of us agreed unanimously, unequivocally, unhesitatingly, without any difference of opinion at all, that the shot that killed Robert Kennedy, fired behind his right ear, was shot from a distance of 1 to 1.5 inches.
Oh my
1
gosh.
to 1.5 inches, with a slightly forward trajectory. Sirhan was standing in front of Kennedy. First of all, how do you get the forward trajectory?
Sir, I hate to do this, but I do have to take my news break. Please stand by. This is a fascinating topic. Thank you very much for being with us. Dr. Cyril Wecht is my guest. We'll be back after.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
Exonation, our special guest this hour is Dr. Cyril Wecht, and he's got a new book that's coming out entitled From Crime Scene to Courtroom. His co-author is Donna Kaufman, and it's being published by our good friends at Prometheus Press. So if you'd like to find out more about this new book that, hey, Christmas is coming up, and it's never too early to get a good Christmas gift, and I'm sure that this would be a welcomed read for those who enjoy the scientific genres, the inquisitive mind who wants to know more about forensics, and from the court scene, crime scene to the court scene. Once again, it is Dr. Wecht, and his co-author is Donna Kaufman. The name of the book is From Crime Scene to Courtroom. And again, it's published by Prometheus Press. The website for Dr. Wecht is www.cyrilwecht.com. And congratulations on another book, sir.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that very much. Yeah, we cover Michael Jackson and Casey Anthony, and several other cases of great interest.
I'd like to ask you about Michael Jackson in a moment or two, sir. But
yeah.
Watching, I remember watching Bobby Kennedy get shot as a child, and then it was played over and over and over again. But you're saying the shot came from the back with
it had a slightly forward trajectory, slightly forward. You hit him behind the right ear and moved forward. That's correct. But most importantly, is the fact that the distance from the muzzle of the gun, confirmed by all these forensic pathologists and corroborated by tests performed by a criminalist shooting that same kind of weapon, a .22 long Ivor Johnson, into pigskin on white paper, which is how we look for the stippling powder residue pattern to ascertain the distance from which a gun has been fired, confirmed that it was shot from a distance of 1 to 1.5 inches. That never came out in the trial. It was given as testimony in the grand jury by Dr. Noguchi, and in the trial of Sirhan. If anybody's wondering, well, how come we never heard about this? In the trial, no forensic scientist was called by the defense attorney, Grant Cooper. Not a forensic pathologist, not a ballistics expert, not a criminalist, not one single forensic scientist, except for psychiatrists. they did pursue the psychiatric aspect, of course, and so on. But so there's your answer. Now, was the defense attorney part of the cover-up, or was he just so completely blinded by his desire to save Sirhan's life and prove that he was crazy and so on? I don't know, and I can't make any accusations because I did not know Grant Cooper personally. I do know this, that he was an experienced criminal defense lawyer. He wasn't some young kid fresh out of law school. And so it's hard for me to believe that he should not have looked at the hard forensic scientific evidence that he would have done had it been the Jones or the Smith or the Brown murder case.
It almost sounds as if that this was the final chapter of the Kennedy assassination.
Well, the final chapter for those two, but then we've got Mary Jo Kopechne with Ted Kennedy.
That's right.
Not an assassination, but a highly controversial case in which the medical examiner, getting back to our discussion before about the two systems, and I mentioned the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, first state to adopt the medical examiner system, 1877. 92 years later, 1969, a guy with an MD degree and the fancy title of deputy medical examiner, standing there at Poca Pond, makes an incredible decision that it is not necessary to have an autopsy performed on the body of a young woman found in a submerged car, who at that time hadn't even been officially identified. Well, then I testified in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, Luzerne County, where Ms. Kopechne was buried. The district attorney had consulted me from Boston, and he was trying to get the body exhumed. I was going to do an autopsy with a colleague in Massachusetts, and the judge, however, based upon the very, very vehement objections of the family and so on, and the fact that no charges have been filed against Ted Kennedy or anybody else, declined to have the body exhumed. But so that's the Kennedy saga, and three different examples you see of what can go wrong. Number one, in JFK, incompetent, inexperienced, untrained people doing the autopsy. Robert F. Kennedy, great autopsy, a wonderful expert forensic pathologist, but if you don't run with the evidence, then what do you have? And the Kopechne case, no autopsy. So the three Kennedy cases are a fascinating lesson in and of themselves when you talk to forensic science students.
Doctor, how long after a person has been deceased and buried can an exhumation of the body be done that will give you, a forensic scientist, any clues as to the cause of death?
It depends on what you're looking for. I've done an exhumation autopsy on someone who had been dead for about 40 years.
Wow.
And then I've done perhaps more exhumation autopsies than any other forensic pathologist. I got one scheduled on Tuesday of next week. The answer to your question is, if you're looking for fractures, if you're looking for gunshot wounds, recovering bullets and things like that, then there's no limitation. Bones will not disintegrate for decades or even longer, and bullets will remain. If, on the other hand, you're looking for something subtle, like a heart attack, you're looking to get some body fluids and tissues for toxicological analysis, then you're remarkably hampered, even by virtue of the embalming process. Somebody's been buried for a day or two. So, it varies. It depends on what you're looking for, and whether the body was embalmed, what kind of casket, where was it buried, and you still don't know. I have been surprised and amazed. I did an autopsy on someone who had been dead for about 40 years. This had to do with a claim under a special act of the federal government, someone who had worked in an atomic energy plant. If they came down with any kind of tumor, any kind of malignancy, they could get awards. And so I did an autopsy. I was absolutely flabbergasted at the wonderful condition of the body. I mean, I could delineate every single organ.
Wow.
I could tell everything, and there was no question at all about my findings. And yet, in another case, someone had been dead for about 5 or 6 years down in Louisiana, a very expensive casket and buried above ground, as you know, as they do in Louisiana. Yep. And I figured, well, I'm going to be able to... I opened up the body, and I was just so disappointed. I mean, the deterioration and decomposition was so advanced, I couldn't tell a darn thing. And the tissues that I recovered for toxicological analysis are highly, highly doubtful in terms of their validity. So that's the story. But I most of the time I talk people out of exhumations
Right.
because I don't want them to spend money unnecessarily, and I always try to find out what they're looking for and so on. And other times, of course, then it's something. The one on Tuesday of next week has to do with a gunshot wound. So that's a worthwhile exhumation. We'll be able to determine for sure whether this person was shot in the front or shot in the back, which is the question and the reason why the family is going ahead with this exhumation.
What is the normal length of time that a forensic examination of a deceased would take?
It varies. If you have a natural death, let's say someone, no injuries of any kind, no extensive surgical procedures to describe, and that person maybe took a bunch of drugs and died, which is a very common cause of death nowadays, not suicide, just accidental deaths, and so on, or someone dies of a heart attack. And if you're an experienced forensic pathologist and you've got a good technician to help you, certainly you can finish the autopsy itself in less than an hour, not counting your dictation and so on. On the other hand, if you get a case where somebody's been shot 7-8 times, and one of those last week, and you got to figure out which is entrance and which is exit and recover bullets inside, you could be there for 2, 3, maybe 4 hours getting x-rays and digging and dissecting and so on. So it varies greatly.
Michael Jackson's case. Worldwide attention, as are several of the other cases that you and I have discussed so far this hour. What is your take on that case, sir?
Well, I think the cause of death is unequivocal, and namely drug toxicity. The administration of those drugs was highly negligent, and I think, and I'm not prosecutorially biased in any way, that's not what I'm known for, but still I must say that Conrad Murray is lucky to be charged only with involuntary manslaughter. It could have been a much higher second-degree murder charge for a physician, a trained physician, to give propofol, Diprovan, Versed to somebody in a home environment setting is absolutely unacceptable. These are powerful drugs. If anybody listening who has had a colonoscopy, they probably receive Versed. You're talking with the doctor, how you doing, this is what we're going to do, and then next thing you know, you're continuing the conversation, except he's saying to you everything looks okay.
That's right, yeah.
And we'll see you next year or 5 years or whatever, and you say, what are you talking about? Well, it's all over, man.
Yes,
it's
sir.
all over. I mean, that drug is unbelievable. To administer that drug and Diprovan in conjunction with 2 or 3 other benzodiazepines, psychotropic drugs which depress the brain and so on, is absolutely unforgivable. And so, I must tell you, quite frankly, no sympathy. I'm not suggesting that Murray should be locked up. They put him on probation. I don't care. I'm just saying, insofar as the validity of the charge based upon what took place, it is perfectly sound and most reasonable and so on. And I don't think there's any defense for what he did or what he failed to do.
What would ever possess a doctor to take that extreme, to cross that line?
Well, and think of how stupid he was. He was getting, as I understand it, $100,000 a month to be a medical babysitter. Boy, I'd like to get a job like that and keep somebody alive until they're 120. So throw in stupidity into the formula, and on top of medical negligence, malpractice, and you've got a serious situation. I can't tell you, but obviously he had no malevolent motive. Quite to the contrary, it was to his great advantage in every respect to collect the money, to come to be Michael Jackson's medical savior, and so on. It's just unbelievable.
It certainly is. During the intro, some of the cases that you worked in included the Waco Branch Davidian fire.
Yes, I did exhumation autopsies there on Steve and Judy Schneider, the 2 principal henchmen of David Koresh, the head of the compound. And I showed that shots had been fired, and we got into distances there and so on, excluded suicide. And those findings, while they did not play out at that time, they did play out later on in civil actions, and when Janet Reno, the Attorney General, got into it to show that the story that was told by the FBI and Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, ATF people, that they had not fired any shots and they didn't do anything until shots were fired from inside, was just unadulterated nonsense, BS, outright lies. And so that was the significance of those examinations. The whole thing was a disaster. I'm not in some kind of retrospective fashion saying that David Koresh was a great person, but the point is they hadn't committed any crimes. They were in that compound. I mean any major crimes, assaults on human beings or so on, and it was well known what they were doing. Every Sunday they went out, bought weapons and so on and so forth, and it came to be known by the FBI that their plans to lay siege had somehow come to be known by the people inside the compound. And so for them to have continued then and to have placed all those lives in jeopardy, which in fact resulted in the deaths of several young children, that was, as far as I'm concerned, a very, very deplorable, most unfortunate incident.
One quick question, sir, before we go to our final break. I don't know if you saw any of the photographs of Osama bin Laden after he had been killed by the SEALs, but do you have any suspicions whether or not Osama bin Laden, number one, was killed, number two, if he's still alive, or any comment at all?
No, I do not have any doubts or suspicions that Osama bin Laden was killed. And I do not think that he is on an island of Scorpios in the Aegean Sea along with John Kennedy and Elvis Presley. So some things I do accept.
Well said, sir. You and I do have to take our final break, but when we come back, Dr. Wecht, I'd like to talk to you about your new book, From Crime Scene to Courtroom. Thank you very much for being with us, sir. It's been a very, very exciting hour here in the X Zone with you. Please stand by. We'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with our guest this hour, Dr. Cyril Wecht. His website is www.cyrilwecht.com, and that's CYRILWECHT.com. My name's Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. Don't go away.
In over 36 years in law enforcement, I've learned a few things. The most important is the proper gathering and preservation of evidence is vital to putting the bad guy behind bars. It's no different in the world of paranormal investigation. Whether it's the search for the afterlife, cryptozoology, extraterrestrials, and UFOs, how we gather that evidence of their existence, preserve that same evidence, and present it to a court of our peers will make the ultimate difference in proving the existence of worlds and entities that are beyond our imagination. Come with me on a journey that seeks to prove with undisputable evidence what man has struggled to believe for centuries. Join me, Larry Lawson, host of the Paranormal Stakeout, coming to the X Zone Broadcast Network. Check out the broadcast schedule for Paranormal Stakeout with yours truly, Larry Lawson, at www.xzbn.net. For more information about me, my travels, and my team, check out our website at www.paranormalfbi.com or join us on Facebook at Florida Bureau of Paranormal.
I am Dr. Carl O'Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
You're listening to the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Welcome back, everyone. Dr. Cyril Wecht is our special guest this hour, www.cyrilwecht.com. He has a brand new book that has just come out The name of the book is From Crime Scene to Courtroom, and Dr. Wecht wrote it with Donna Kaufman. Tell us a little bit about this book, sir.
Well, this book follows the pattern, the genre of what I've done with my other 6 books, Cause of Death, Grave Secrets, Who Killed John Benet Ramsey, Mortal Evidence, Tales from the Morgue, and A Question of Murder. The book goes into cases in which I have been involved personally, directly, sometimes where I did an autopsy, sometimes a second autopsy, sometimes testified, sometimes consulted by news media, other agencies, and so on, and present in an understandable, not hyper-technical fashion, but in a serious, real manner, not in fictional fashion, what took place in these cases. And so we get into Michael Jackson, get into Casey Anthony, get into Colonel Shue, the Air Force colonel in Texas, who they said committed suicide after cutting off his nipples and his little finger and part of the incision into his chest. And we showed that it was a homicide led to his automobile crash and so on. And some other top-notch cases of a fascinating nature. So people have really enjoyed these because they show, what it's like in real life.
Right.
And they get into some things that, not that we're, breaching confidences, but they do get into matters of a personalized nature that Donna and or I had been able to uncover because of our relationships with various people involved in those cases.
In all the years that you've been a forensic expert, sir, what has been the most significant case that you've worked on?
Well, obviously I have to make that JFK because he was the President of the United States, because the case in and of itself is so highly complex, so incredibly controversial, and gets into many, many areas of investigation. So that is number one. And beyond that, then, pick and choose cases that people have never even heard of, or maybe just a little bit here and there. One of the cases that I just loved was it was a case that won the Sundance Film Festival Award, Brothers Keeper, for brothers up there in upstate New York. The one was charged with the mercy killing of another one, and I worked on that case pro bono, and I showed that it did not happen. And these 4 little guys that lived in a ramshack hovel with no running water, electricity, and so on. It was just breaks your heart. Anybody wants to get Brothers Keeper, go to your whatever those stores are that have these old movies,
right,
TV, and so on, and get that, and it'll bring tears to your eyes. So, I mean, that's just an example. But there are so many cases that are highly... In fact, I just saw in a paper today that Captain Jeffrey McDonald, the Green Beret captain, he's going to have some DNA testing done. I think the court approved that.
Dr. Wecht, I hate to do this, my friend, but you and I have to say so long for now. I'd love to have you back on in the future, sir. It's been a great pleasure talking to you, sir. Have a good one.
Thanks
Exo Nation, Dr. Cyril Wecht has been my guest. www.cyrilwecht.com. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as the X Zone continues from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.